Former Washington Governor Jay Inslee gave his final State of the State address this past week. Joining me to tell us more about this is the Center Square's TJ Martinell. TJ, he gave his final address this week. He focused a lot on government spending and on the budget. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so what he's really centering his speech around and his final address to the legislature is that when he came into office, the legislature had done a lot of budget cuts due to the Great Recession. And his argument was that as a result, there were long term problems that the state had to deal with. And he's touting the increased spending. And for people who are wondering, the budget, the 2 year operating budget was $38 billion when he took office in 2013. It is now 75.5 billion, and it's going to increase slightly, I believe, as a result. To be fair, and we'll get into this, that they're now facing a significant budget shortfall this biennium and over the next 4 years. So his argument is that this increased spending was necessary to improve state programs and services, and was very much defending his legacy in that regard. And it was interesting that he did mention climate change and environmental efforts he's done, the Climate Commitment Act, and things like that. But this was also a major component of his speech.
And what have been some of the responses to this speech?
Well, it depends on depends on who you're asking, but I'd say for proponents of Inslee, they would highlight the areas where they've increased spending in education, they've increased spending in homelessness, they've increased spending in different departments. They've been spending a lot more money in environmental efforts. Like I was saying, they're trying to electrify the state's transportation sector. They're trying to push more green energy. And so that's what the proponents would say. Now, his critics would highlight the fact that in the meantime, crime has gotten far worse. The housing affordability is basically non-existent in a lot of areas of the state for anyone not making a significant amount of money annually. And then also the homelessness problem has gone up. The homeless population is as high as it's ever been, and also drug overdose deaths is increasing as well. So, and then also the academic performance by students has also gone down since the state was pumping billions of dollars into K-12. One thing, though, to note with that is that the state was under a court order, under a 2012 state Supreme Court ruling, McCleary, where the court said you need to basically fully fund basic education on your own. You can't rely on local school district levies to fund that stuff. So the state was taking on a financial burden that had been otherwise carried by local school districts. So in one sense, the legislature really didn't necessarily have a choice on whether it was going to increase spending in education. Now, it could have cut spending in areas, but it needed to fully fund education and not rely on other sources. So that's what critics would say, is that the increased spending didn't turn to better results, is what they would say.
And this speech came right before the swearing in of a new governor. It also comes before the legislature is going to be working on a budget for the next 2 years. What was kind of his attitude towards the upcoming new administration, new legislature? What was he kind of asking of them?
I think what he's really asking of them is to not cut spending. He's proposed a wealth tax that has received pushback from even progressive, I'd say activists or businessmen, people who favor a progressive income tax, but they are opposed to a wealth tax. And for clarification, a income tax is a tax on money that you make. A wealth tax is a tax on basically property that you own, based on how much it's worth, which is can be subjective depending on what type of property we're talking about. And that's his way of really clearing this budget shortfall. And so what he's telling lawmakers to do is to not reduce spending. He even says, you're going to have lobbyists who are kind of trying to talk to you and advocate for cutting spending here, cutting spending there, something like that. But he's saying that they should not do that because it's going to cause the same problems that he believes was caused by budget cuts in, roughly around 2011, 2010. And what he's also arguing is that the legislature has a clear mandate to continue increasing revenue streams like taxes because the voters rejected several anti-tax initiatives this last November. The voters declined to repeal the capital gains tax on profits from profits. They also voted against repealing the Climate Commitment Act, which generates revenue for the state through carbon auctions, a significant amount of revenue, to be fair. And they also declined to repeal the long-term care tax. So this is for a long-term care program in Washington state. So in his mind, the outcome of these initiatives, their defeats, is a signal that voters want or are in support of lawmakers raising taxes. And to be fair, others would argue otherwise for different reasons. But that's effectively what he's telling the legislature, is that they're facing significant fiscal challenges, but the answer is not budget cuts.
Well, TJ, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.